Designing the world we live in. It's the Tell Me More podcast. Join us as we celebrate the people who shape our communities and our lives.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm really excited for today. We're going to dive deep into America's housing crisis. I know this is a big topic, but it impacts everyone. But very rarely do we hear from architects on the biggest challenges they see and potential solutions to the significant housing challenge. So, and also just a spoiler alert, we're not policy nerds. Instead, we're going to instead of focusing on policy, we're going to examine the very real challenges and solutions from an architect's perspective. I want you all to help me figure this out, help us figure this out. Why building more homes seems impossible in the U.S. and what innovative approaches or just solutions, potential solutions, are to this challenge. Before kicking off, I do want to give kind of like a quick fun fact, which is prefabricated housing accounts for approximately 3% of the housing market in the United States. So as you can see, it's pretty small segment. When you go to Sweden, it's at around 45% of housing production. So I was surprised by this. I did not realize, first off, how little the United States was and how much prefabrication is happening in Sweden. So that was like pretty surprising little fun facts there. All right, so I guess my first question is, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing the housing industry today? Like, what are the main pain points in getting a building constructed? Like, we're talking about a house people live in. There's different types of housing. What do you think, when it comes down to it, as architects, as designers, you are getting a project built for someone to then live in this circumstance? So what are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing in that process of getting a project built?
Well, let me start. Well, Nate, thank you for hosting this amazing podcast, amazing episode. Sorry, we are all hosting it. But I'm glad we're speaking about this. And I think to your question, the first thing that comes to mind is high interest rates. Interest rates are pretty high or have been high for the past 2 years. And that on top of the fact that there are not that many houses in the market to be sold, like the inventory of houses is also relatively low. So these two factors I feel are kind of affecting. And the reason, well, I say this is because all the people who bought homes at like 3% or 4% do not want to sell those homes and buy new ones because they're going to get it at a higher interest rate at 7%, or 8% of whatever the interest is going on right now. So they are locked in. And as a result, new home buyers cannot buy these new homes, which are already expensive, plus the higher interest rate. And there are also not many people selling it. So there's less inventory just in the existing housing market. And to top that, the cost of construction, cost of materials have gone up since the pandemic, right? It went up in the pandemic. Everybody's like, oh, it's hard to ship materials. It will definitely come down. But, we live in a capitalistic society. Once you've seen so much profits, it's never going to go down. It has come down, but relatively, but it's never going to go back down to like pre-pandemic levels, right? So I feel like these kind of factors are affecting the whole market in terms of affordability across the board, at least for residential homes.
So to summarize, like you're saying, okay, interest rates and high costs of materials.
But also land.
And also
like
low
where are you
availability of low inventory in the market.
And low inventory. Okay.
Oh, I have another one, but Haiti, yeah, you go on.
No,
Haiti.
I was just gonna add land to the list. Like earlier, Nate, you asked what is the issue with building homes. And I think land is a really big part. Like, one, you already have a lot of density in Metro Atlanta, and you can start building in the suburbs, but this generation does not want to live in the suburbs. So now you're kind of at an impasse where you maybe have the land and the resources and potentially the infrastructure to build in the suburbs, but you don't have the population that wants to move out to the suburbs. There's a lot of people that want to live in the city. And then that comes to the multi-family housing market, which, Akhil, you work in multifamily, right?
Yeah. Well, I want to add to what you said also, the younger generation not wanting to stay in the burbs. It's the burbs, guys, not the suburbs. Come on. What are we doing?
You're
Oh,
the
anyway,
cool one, tell us.
what I meant to say was, again, because they don't want to travel long distance, because to now travel long distance, you have to buy a car and you have to pay a loan on that car, and you have your student loans, and you have these loans. So it's just a lot of money that you're spending staying in the burbs, and that's why I feel like many of them also people now prefer walkability as compared to having to drive a lot. But anyway, what were you saying, Haley?
So
this doesn't really, I mean, I guess in Atlanta, that's not the issue, right? Because Atlanta is not walkable, which is a whole nother conversation.
That's another episode, yeah.
That's a whole nother episode. But
we'll get to that episode. Yeah. So in the article, the architect that they're interviewing is Ivan Rupnik, and he mentions that as well as like we just need to build more houses. And what I'm hearing from you as well is like we just need more housing stock. So I guess my question though still goes back to like what are the biggest prohibitors to making that happen? Like why are we not building more housing stock? Like what are the biggest challenges and why is that not happening?
I don't really agree with building more houses. I feel like there is still a lot of real estate out there that might not be rentable or viable because of the condition it's in. But if you buy something that might need a lot of work, that's a lot of time and effort for someone who's a first-time home buyer to put into a property, and they might not have the financial means or the knowledge or the time to bring it up. So they might not want to invest their time and energy into a property that's not already ready to be lived in.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up adaptability because like there's so many, we have this weird circumstance where there's like lots of vacancies for commercial properties. And then we have this like housing crisis, which is kind of interesting because it's like clearly we did not build for adaptability to begin with. Like, I don't know, maybe it's a sign of like a failure of like how we built for those commercial properties. I'm not sure, but it's just something I've been thinking about. It's like we built all these office towers without really considering like one day maybe we don't need office towers, and does it make sense to think more holistically when we're going through the design build project to say, hey, actually like we need to think about if this were to one day be housing or for data centers, for instance, like what would that look like?
And we're still building offices. Sorry.
Well, I also want to add, I think, well, this is how I see the American system, right? I think American system kind of runs around the fact that after you graduate, you move to another city, and then once you move to another city, you start working for a couple of years and then you buy a home in a different city. So it was always the system where one person, like every time a family is moving into another city, another family is moving out. So they're like, it was always kind of like balanced into how much was there in the market. And this is after the 2008 crisis, when there was like so much that was being built and so many loans that was being given out, which kind of crashed the whole market, right? So after that, that's how like the system was. But then now, pandemic, everybody stayed put in their own cities, like in their current situation, and they didn't want to move. And they're like, you know what, we'll move after the pandemic happens. But once after the pandemic happens, the interest rate shot up. And you're like, oh my God, I can't buy new homes now because I want to pay just 3%. I'm comfortable. We have a big family. I don't think you can afford to do 7%. That's one aspect, right? And the second aspect of building a new home, if you were to build a new home right now, say like a 2,000 square foot house, like the cost of it would be at least, I want to say, like the cost of the land would like kind of vary. If you were to buy it closer to the city, it's like 100K for like a 8,000 square foot lot, and then you build a 2,000 square foot home in that, and that will come up to another 300K if it's like a good home. So you're essentially spending like 400,000 just on a new home, and a 7% on that is a lot.
That I would double
More
that
than
number.
Well, no, because I recently spoke to a
Double.
contractor. It's not. It's actually that much. It's not. It's not more than that. This is like being conservative, right? It's not like a luxury home. Just a $2,000 square foot home. Like per square foot cost will come up like $200. So that'll plus another plus the labor plus the land cost. And this is like being like a good home, but not like over the top home.
If you can build a home for that, like you should start building homes.
What's happening
well,
as we speak? No, I'm kidding.
one, I don't know if there's any land available to build homes
Wait, what are you saying? There's so much land available.
in the city. Like there's
In the
You just have
burbs.
to pay for it.
in the suburbs, but I'm talking
Yeah.
about
You
in
can
the
buy land in
city.
Atlanta.
In the city, well,
Not
there's
for
a
100
land.
grand.
Yeah, no. I'm just talking about like outside, like away from like, like further
But
past Decatur, like, 20 miles
how
from, but
how often do people like I feel like if you're really investing in creating and designing your own home, you have to kind of go even further than the suburbs because it's all development out in the suburbs. Like you have these cookie cutter homes and just a sea of
well, I was talking
subdivisions.
about these cookie cutter homes will cost you
Okay.
400, 500 change.
Yeah. So I'm curious though, like if we come back to the original question, like when it comes to actual like project delivery, like you're sitting in firms, I know that you're not like actively working on like housing. Like what are some of the challenges that you face and actually just like are there even challenges in getting a home built? Like it sounds like according to you, Akhil, like this is a pretty easy process. You can do it for $200 a square foot, and if you had some like money to buy some land, you would be doing this right now.
Yeah, I would, but the problem is I don't have the money.
So I mean, this kind of goes
And
against. Like, this is surprising again because it's like this goes against. Like we'll get into the prefab thing, but this goes against this notion that building houses that we need to do it faster or more efficient, or even maybe at like a lower cost. I know there was some statistics that said that this was like bringing down costs when you do prefab by like, I don't know, 20 or 30%. I don't know what those numbers are in the States, but yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to like kind of dig into that. Like what are you really not seeing any challenges or pain points in the project delivery?
Me?
Anyone?
Well, so Nate, you're right. Prefab costs definitely cheaper for sure. Like if you were, I was just looking at this. I don't know if you've heard of this lady. Her name is Cody Sanchez. She does videos on businesses in and around the country. She put out a video recently where she was speaking to this business owner who does shipping containers, prefab shipping container homes. And, he was talking about how easy it is to build a 20 by 40 foot long shipping container into a, I think a studio apartment, I guess, or even something smaller than that, right? And if you want a bigger home, you can combine those two to make it like 40 by 40. And then that becomes like a bigger, wider home. Um, I'm going to pull up the specifics, but then so he was talking about how since it's so easy to just make a bunch of them together, and you're right, it does reduce the cost because then you're just building it on in the factory and then just shipping it. All you need to do is connect sewage and water to that, and then you're good to go. So yes, like forget this website. When I was trying to buy a house and I couldn't buy a house, I found an empty plot of land, and I found this website which gives out those trailers that you can hook up into your back of the truck. It's like a whole one bedroom home for like 70,000, and it's pretty good. All you have to do is, like I said, hook up sewage. So yes, it does reduce the cost like a lot, but you don't get the same kind of finish that you would get like a regular home, which is why I feel like, at least in the States, it's not growing as much. I want to say it's being used for like ADUs, like additional dwelling units on the backside, like mother-in-law suites that they want to add on.
Airbnb.
But yeah, but there is a big catch to that. Not every zoning allows you to do that. You have to find a zoning that allows multifamily units, which, back to your question, I finally had the answer to that. That's one regulatory problem that happens in the city. I don't know other cities. Like my lot is on an R2 zone land, and I can't have an additional unit on the backside. I mean, there are obviously loopholes. We'll get to that. But as it
We
stands, you can't add.
we need to show like recordings of my neighborhood planning units. There's some very staunch advocates for keeping single family home.
Right.
And there was a symposium in Atlanta to kind of move this forward to kind of get beyond that. But, some people do have like, I don't know if the concern is legitimate or not, but like they're concerned that like investors will come in and start like maximizing properties and having like a bunch of investment properties. But there's ways to kind of like guard against that. So I agree. The regulatory thing is like really frustrating to like block density from happening. And then it kind of just like pushes things out in terms of affordability when it comes to cities.
I also want to add, I think there is a housing crisis, but it's not in areas that we think is like. I don't think there's a housing crisis in Atlanta, but there's definitely a housing crisis in California, because it's really expensive to buy a home there. Like it's expensive to buy a home at all in California. It's
I
like
think there's
a
a housing
million
crisis in
dollars.
Atlanta.
You
Yeah,
think so?
we don't have enough housing.
Oh, like to buy or to rent?
Both. All.
Oh, huh.
I mean, to rent maybe, but to buy for sure, because you can't afford the things that are out there. But also, can be like there's companies that have started creating Airbnbs and taking over so many apartments in multifamily unit buildings. So individuals can't buy property because all of those apartments are being bought out by companies and creating Airbnbs. And I mean I think I was up in Boston a couple years ago, and I was trying to find a place to rent out. And there's one company that has so many Airbnbs across the board in those brownstone homes, and they've bought it all out because they can afford it, and individuals don't
Wow.
have the money to afford stuff that like afford homes because they're being bought out by companies. And I feel like that's very similar in a lot of metro cities.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, the same thing happens in Atlanta too, just not
Yeah.
as like extreme of a scale.
Right.
and not to mention, Wall Street, corporate companies getting into real estate and buying out all the homes and then renting it out, because
Exactly.
it's perfect cash flow for them.
Yeah.
Month
And I
on
think
month.
that's part of the issue with the housing crisis in Atlanta is because everything's getting bought out by companies and developers and being rented out. So there's not an issue with renting properties. There's this shortage to buy.
Yeah. Okay. So before moving on
The
to
other
some, oh yeah,
Well, I was going to bring it back to the prefab and the notion of prefabricated homes. I feel like it is a perception that prefabricated homes might be lower quality or less visually appealing to people, at least maybe in America. And maybe that's probably why it hasn't taken off, I would imagine.
interesting.
Yeah.
Akhil, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if I would ever want to live in a container home, which I just pulled up the website. Uh, I
I
just
mean,
pulled up the website, and a 40 feet long luxury container home, one bedroom, sleeps 2 to 4, is $140,000.
that sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a
When you say
Joshua
luxury, I'm
model.
sure it's beautiful. I've seen
Yeah.
some really beautiful
Yeah.
So
homes on wheels. Like
right,
the ones that
yeah,
they
yeah.
go camping in. They're
Mhm.
very beautiful and very nice and very nicely designed. Intentionally designed.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I'm going to come back to my original question, but before that, like there are multiple moments in history where like we've made kind of like I would say like a push for prefabricated homes, like even starting with, I don't know if you're all familiar with like Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion house, which is kind of like a crazy round house. He did a lot of like work on farms, and so like brought that to housing. Of course, that like didn't take off, and even Frank Lloyd Wright also had like a prefab initiative as well that also didn't take off. So obviously prefab still happens today. Like, why don't you think that this hasn't taken hold more in the States? Like, we're doing site construction. It sounds like based on your view that it's like going pretty well. It's like a pretty efficient process with no bumps in the road, which I find hard to believe. But
Wait, which
yeah,
one? The prefab or the normal construction?
like site construction for
Okay, okay, yeah,
houses.
yeah.
So what do you think are some like barriers to is prefab even like a good or viable option? Should we be thinking about other potential solutions? And yeah, why don't you think it hasn't taken off yet in a more substantial way? More than 3%, like going from 3% to 15%.
I guess my question, I think I lost y'all.
You got to answer the question with an answer, not a question.
You can
with a
answer a question with a question.
I will answer a question with a question. My question is, where are we putting these homes? Like, you still have to buy the land, which is really expensive.
Yeah.
So even if
Wait,
you have a prefabricated home,
So yeah, that could be.
it's still
No
a challenge
question.
to find the land and place it on there. Yes, Akhil.
What is expensive in y'all's minds for land? How much do you think is expensive?
I think a lot near where I live is like, I don't think you can get one under 100,000. But
Yeah, that's closer to the city. That's why. But if you go further down
you
south or
should be
further,
able to get one for like 75 or 30, but that would be pretty.
Mhm.
That would be
Yeah,
like a nice
30?
deal.
yeah,
But
you get land for like 25-30K.
but
That's like
I
say if
guess
you were to
two
take
parts.
downtown
Like,
as the place to
one,
drive
you
to,
don't want
that would be
land
like
in
a
the middle
30
of
minute or
nowhere.
40-minute drive.
Or maybe you do, depending on your taste.
What? I didn't hear that. What did you say?
I said, one, you don't want land in the middle of nowhere. And then I didn't get any response, so I was like, maybe you
Oh,
do,
I did hear
depending
that.
on what your preference is. And second, I
Mhm.
don't think if you're trying to live in a subdivision, you're not going to be allowed to install a prefabricated home within a subdivision because they have their own requirements.
That's
So
another thing, right?
unless you're trying to find like a lot for a single family home in the middle of nowhere, like zoning comes back into play. It's like how often do you find residential lots
Mhm.
available for purchase?
What about density though? I mean, you could develop like probably 20 or 20 units on like, I don't know. There's definitely land opportunities to go for
Yeah.
like a density play.
So yeah, I mean, I'm talking about one house, right? If you want
Yeah.
to purchase one prefabricated home, place it anywhere, you could definitely create a community of prefabricated homes. I think there is a community of tiny homes near Atlanta. Like, you could take that initiative, but again, it's trying to find people that, one, would want to downsize and are open to living in a non-luxury space, outside of town. So there's all these variables that come with creating a community of prefabricated homes, right?
Mm.
And also HOA. So wait, Haley, like you can buy individual properties, individual lots in neighborhoods too. It does. You
Yes.
can buy them, right? Is that what you were saying? Or are you saying you can't buy them?
You can buy lots, but they also have to look a certain way.
But those are HOAs, though.
Yeah.
Not all neighborhoods have HOA. My neighborhood does not have HOA.
So those are single family homes, but they also, like, how many available plots do you have around your house?
I think they're like
Go-
5 plots.
Go on Zillow right now. I'm seeing one for 37,000.
There's one opposite, like 4 houses down from my house, and he put it up at 270. I'm like, I was
Exactly.
like, yeah, that's fun. I had to keep a straight face when he said 270.
So compared to the 270K for a lot, how much is a prefabricated home for 2,000
Another
square
70.
feet?
I don't think there's a 2,000. That would be a custom auto. But just going off of what's available right now, you get
Sure.
like one sleeps two.
Yeah, I am seeing a couple plots here for like 60, 70K in the city of Atlanta.
Hmm.
Most are more like 100 and 200 though.
And then how much would you imagine are prefabricated homes?
This one's at 90,000. The one that I'm looking at it's
Yeah.
a Joshua model, California inspired, is at 90,255, and you can put an additional rooftop view for $10,000. You can do a cabin cladding of ebony wood for another $12,000. So the total comes up to 115.
Interesting.
Yeah, sleeps too.
I'm still curious though, like prefab is one solution to housing. Like what do you think is that the solution, and is it the solution to what? Like is it the solution to more housing faster, more affordable, or are there other solutions, whether it's like fixing a supply chain issue, like for instance housing materials in a warehouse nearby Atlanta, for instance, to improve the material supply chain? Is it like adapting office buildings? I know there's lots of issues with that. Some can do it, some can't. There's warehouses that could potentially be like adapted. Like I'm curious, we're talking about prefab as like a solution, but like why is that the solution, and what is it a solution to? And are there
I
other
don't know if it is
solutions?
a solution.
That's a great question. I think for one, the materials, or like just the whole bringing in the stocking in the materials and all of that, that's not going to come down because, like I mentioned, we're in a capitalistic society. All the corporates have tasted profits. They're going to bring it down by like 3% or 5%, but that's about it. The materials are never going to go back down. Once it's up, it's always up, right? But to your question of what's another one, which Haley also mentioned, is like building a community. So imagine you find like 3 plots and you build like 4 homes on that, but that's kind of like a small community that's shared by, I don't know, 4 families. So that way um, they kind of share the cost of the land and construction. So like kind of community way of living. But again, the zoning does not allow that to happen.
Yeah. I was like, I think there's a lot of politics and policy change that needs to happen before some of these ideas could be implemented.
Yeah. I mean, like what if, like, let's just say, since we're not like, again, we do know some things about policy and all the restrictions, but like, let's just say like taking out policy, or even if like, yeah, just like kind of ignoring policy for a little bit. What would those look like? Or like what policies would have to change?
Well, I think initially the whole idea that all of these were zoned this way was also because it was a car-centric society. I mean, it still is, but like the goal was to push the homes out bigger spaces so that people drive longer. The car lobby all of that nonsense. But I think not going too much into that. Um, I don't know. I feel like making these individual single family residential into multifamily plots can increase density, which I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. But then that kind of affects the public systems that we have in terms of public infrastructure like water and sewage and electricity. That needs to be capable to handle this increase in density if the plots were to be reassigned to multifamily, right? Well, I see that as one big hurdle to begin with, just from the city's perspective, why they wouldn't do it.
To add to that, I feel like because if we're speaking about Atlanta, because we're such a car-centric city, you're gonna run into like transportation issues and you're going to run into parking issues. And even if you want these spaces to be walkable and pedestrian friendly, there's no infrastructure to support that kind of lifestyle unless there is a large, like, gigantic changes that happen in the city to begin changing that that idea of us being pedestrian friendly. Like, I don't
Wow.
think we're there yet. I don't even think we're close.
Wow. I've never thought about that connection between like actually expanding public transportation to promote density, to make density like more of a viable option, especially like when you think about like the parking challenges and traffic and all of that.
Oh yeah, and I came across a funny, I wouldn't say funny, an interesting fact. This is a Tell Me More fact number 2 for today.
Yes, we get 2 facts.
Yeah. Apparently, there's in the United States of America, there are 9 parking spots for every car.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was like, wow.
Okay. Soon we'll have robot cars charging our houses. It'll all even out.
Yeah, that's a whole new different topic.
That fact is pretty accurate in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's probably more than that in Atlanta.
Because okay, this can't be in the episode, but I'm just gonna throw it out there.
It's gonna be in the episode.
This can't be in the episode because I don't know how accurate the details are. But I was talking to someone and we were talking about housing or like parking in Atlanta. And they're like, well, there's so many parking lots. There's so many parking lots in the city of Atlanta, but people don't want to buy it because the property taxes increase based on what's on that plot. So if it's a parking lot, the property taxes are kind of low. If you add different programs or different usages to it, they skyrocket. And they become almost unaffordable. And then even if you build a parking deck, I mean, parking decks are really expensive, right? It costs what, 90, 110K per parking spot? No, not.
I did
not
not
90K.
know parking decks were
not 90K.
I thought that was
yeah, not 90K.
I thought parking deck like you can do like talk about like pre-construction. Like I don't know, you can get pretty efficient with parking lots, maybe, but
no, parking lots are really expensive.
Wow,
it's definitely several $1,000s per parking spot to build a parking structure.
Good to know.
So I think, Nate, to your question, policy change, what would it look like with that change? Imagine all of the single family residential plots have like 2 homes instead of 1, right? And so they house 4 families, but that kind of increases the density then right there. Now, will it decrease the cost? I don't know. I don't think so, because everybody wants to make money, so they will. You can see a 10% decrease. I want to say 10%, but it's not going to go back to pre-pandemic levels. Like, for example, the house that was being bought pre-pandemic for like say $250, right now it's being sold at $375, right? It may come even though right now we're at higher interest rates, it's still at 375. That's because nobody's buying it. But imagine this, when it comes down to low interest rates to like 4% next year, if at all. But there are more buyers in the market. So it's a seller's market, and the seller is going to amp it up to like say 425 just because he has so many people willing to pay that money. So it's never going to come back down. I forget what the point was I was trying to make.
I was
What
going
was
to
the
add
train of
something,
thought?
Yeah, I mean, it
Akhil.
sounds like the challenges.
Akhil,
Sorry.
you mentioned
So,
earlier about, changing the density and adding more homes to a plot. I'm going to play devil's advocate and say that what if you bought that plot so you could have a yard, or you could have more space, like a backyard for your kids or your dog or whatever. Now you're cutting that down for a little bit less money, but you're also not getting that lifestyle that you may have imagined with a big yard.
I was hoping you didn't bring up the yard word. It's a trigger point for me.
I mean, if
I
you're
hate the
buying
yard. Why do we need such big yards? Like, what are
to
we trying
play
to
in,
achieve?
what's the
We're not
difference
farming here, are
if
we?
you didn't want the yard, go to a multifamily. Why did you get a single family home?
Because there is none
You
without
get
a
it for the
yard.
yard.
No, I got it because I want a single family home, but I don't want the yard. The cost, so the cost to maintain that yard, oh my gosh, why? I'm not even farming. I might as well put like a whole row of barley, maybe some bananas, some chiku,
You
a
could
pea
put
good.
some mint and tomatoes. They grow great in Atlanta.
I grow mint and tomatoes inside inside farm.
Then
Okay,
move to a multifamily house.
no, you
I
should.
This
don't
is
want
a
to stay in
housing
a
crisis, and
multifamily
people need your
house.
single family home.
Oh, really? They would rather come for a single family when there are so many other multifamily
Yeah,
homes.
people want yards for their dogs and their kids.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. I agree. Some people have preferences, and I'm not saying anything against that, right? I get that. But I think a lot of them are being like me, are being pushed to buy it even though we don't need it. But I want a single family home, but I just don't want such a big yard. I'm happy with the small yard. But based on the filters that I put in Zillow when I was buying the house, these were only available. So here we are doing my yard every Sunday.
You could rent out your farmland.
You could do a community garden.
Yeah, I could I could do a lot of things, and if I did all those things, I wouldn't be here right now.
All right.
Okay,
So
we are
That's a
at
great point.
7:25. My battery is dying.
okay,
How do we wrap this up?
I'm going to wrap it up, but I have one last question before we wrap this up, which is, we have to talk a little bit about technology. What role do you think technology plays in all this? Is it a part of the solution? Is it the solution? What part of the solution is it, if it is part of the solution? Like, just any quick takes on what role do you think technology plays in this? Is the technology we have adequate? Are there any opportunities for like founders to jump in and like take advantage of this? Do you have any quick thoughts?
I think technology is always a option. I don't know if it's the option or the solution, but it's definitely a tool. I don't know how, though.
Do you think the tools that you use today are adequate to solve the challenges at hand, or do you fundamentally think it's not necessarily really even a technology problem to begin with? Because we've been talking mostly about policy.
I don't think it's a technology problem to begin with, but I think there's a lot of solutions that can come about from technology. Like, there's a lot of studies that we could use technology to do to help us find a solution, but I don't think technology is the solution, and I don't think technology is necessarily stopping us to get to those solutions, but it will definitely help us get there.
Nate, what do you say?
Well, I'm curious,
What
like,
do you think?
Well, I definitely agree with Haley. Like, it's definitely a part of the solution, because I mean, we're already using technology to get a project built. I don't really know how technology can like optimize the process even more without like fully understanding all the problems at hand that are prohibiting the housing crisis we're seeing. Like, it seems like this more of like a supply chain issue, and there's different ways to solve that. Maybe technology can help with those new solutions of, like, for instance, like helping the supply chain, or maybe if it's a housing, I don't know, I got kind of off track there, but I guess my question too is, like, if you do think technology is a part of the solution, like, what does that actually look like? Like, is that a new tool that you use? Is it enhanced functionality in like how you design? Like, yeah, I don't know, like more specifically, like what that would look like.
Well, I think this is a broader question as to how technology can help, right? Because if you were to take the supply chain issues, yes, we could be more efficient in the way materials are placed throughout the country, and that can reduce lead times. But I think we also didn't speak about the one major cost in construction is labor. And the fact that everything gets so expensive is because of labor. So yes,
Yeah.
technology can help materials arrive sooner, but that, I want to say 10%. It's going to reduce it by 10%, right? In the overall cost. But that's not even a scratch in the overall budget. If it's like, 3D printing, and how can you get labor to be more cheaper? Because then the cost of construction goes down. Even, for example, even if we do import materials from outside the country, right? Yes, it gets a whole lot cheaper, but having to assemble it in this country, it just pushes it up all the way back up. Like just labor is expensive. So like 3D printing or new ways of, I don't know, creating robots that can do all the construction work for you, that's going to reduce the cost for sure. Is
Yeah.
it materials? Sure, yeah, but not as much as we want it to. Is what I think. I don't know.
I'm glad you brought up labor. We're already seeing in kitchens like so much innovation from that standpoint of like using robots to replace labor. And
Oh yeah, like prefab kitchens. Oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
there's
I
also
thought you
like
were talking about like robots are cooking food.
Yeah, like cooking food, preparing,
Okay.
or like even just like
Serving.
a basic barista coffee machine, for instance, where you can kind of, small.
Well, on LinkedIn, I saw I've seen a couple of posts where they're trying to prefab the entire kitchen unit based on, like, you give a design, like you give a layout of what your kitchen is, and they'll just like stack it up, and then they'll come and plonk it in your house. So that kind of reduces the cost right there, right? Because instead of you spending like 3-4 days with the carpenter doing the cabinets and then the countertops, all of that, but you have this, which is plonk it and then you're good to go.
Like IKEA.
So yeah, like IKEA, but better.
So if you had to choose, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you had to like vote for one thing, prefab, site construction, or 3D printing a house, or is there another category I should include?
What is site construction? Like, what
Just
do you
like
mean?
Normal
I
construction.
guess like how we build houses today is mostly site construction. Prefab, 3D printing.
Is there another option?
Maybe like a hybrid approach of like, I don't know. No, to keep it simple, we'll just keep those three. I'm sure there's lots of other options, but prefab, site construction, 3D printing. If you had to vote for one, which one would it be?
That's a good one. Well, that's a tough one. Can I rank it based on profit?
You can do choice ranking.
Okay, so based on profit.
Oh my gosh, so money-minded to kill.
Hey, what is the value that is being provided? Because the workers need to eat as well. The laborers
You were the one talking about taking away their jobs.
That was a suggestion for like tech entrepreneurs to do something if they want to do it. I don't want to take jobs from the people.
I'm just saying, you said let's 3D print, prefab everything and get robots to build stuff. You're taking away jobs.
That was the answer to the question of what the possibility was, Haley.
So
do I want to do it?
Go ahead, rank.
Okay. if you were to just go based on the bottom line and based on profit basis, I want to say my top one is prefab, and then stick construction, and then 3D printing. I'm not too sold on 3D printing just yet because yes, there is one house though that won the AIA award last year, right? That was built. I think was it in Texas or
Yeah,
California?
Texas, Icon,
Texas.
and I think Lake Plato.
Yeah, but that was way more expensive than it should be for that.
They wanted to build the top model.
Right. And there's also the Icon Housing that's doing this right now out of Texas. Have you heard of this company, Icon?
Mm-hmm.
I think
they're doing
it's
it.
Icon. They
did that house with Lake Plato.
Oh, okay. They did that. Cool. I'm gonna go with stick construction or the prefab.
All right, Haley, what are your ranked choices? Ranked decisions.
Feel like there's a sweet spot. If you can I think that this would kind of defeat the purpose of having prefab. But if you can kind of customize it a little bit more, I feel like you could take a lot of those elements and put it and incorporate it into standard construction. I feel like I'm thinking about Legos and like building blocks and picking and choosing what you want and creating something, which might be another solution to like the aesthetics of the prefab homes that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen Bensonwood. They're out of Vermont and they do prefab, but it's timber frame prefabricated homes. But they're also custom. They're custom designed. They're based off of like their standards of how they build, super high performing, building mostly in the shop and then like delivering these homes to pretty like high caliber. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, Bensonwood might be like a nice place to start to like look into that more, or what that could look like. But I'm sure it could take lots of other forms. That's just one example.
Yeah, what do you think? What are your choices?
Well, we didn't really talk about like using alternative materials. Maybe that's just for like another podcast.
Alternative materials.
Just using like bamboo, different types of earth-related materials, like that sort of thing.
But again, there's no labor to do that.
Yeah, labor.
So you would have to
high labor costs for that.
Yeah, you would have to bring in like highly skilled labor from outside the country.
Yeah,
and that's going to like. So yes, it could bring down the cost of materials, but like labor.
Yeah,
and sustainability. Like if you're talking about bamboo, we didn't talk about sustainability either.
Well, prefab fits into the sustainability conversation. Well, everything fits into the sustainability conversation, but I was going to kind of cheat, which was bring in a new one, which is like renovation, and then go like renovation, like renovating properties that we don't think we can renovate and making it possible to make those into houses as like option one. Then option two, the reason why I like prefab is because like there's this potential to like like reuse for other uses. So I recently came across a project where they have these I forget the dimensions, but it's like 60 by 20, and they can build everything from like a K through 12 school to like a high rise to like a number of different things. And I'll send you the company. I'm forgetting their name off the top of my head. But I thought that was a pretty cool project because it was like, oh, you could have a pre-K school, or you could have like, let's just say like K through 12 school for like 10, 15 years. And then once that, then you can just like relocate it based off of if that neighborhood changes. Like if those demographics change, they don't need as much of a school, that they need to relocate to another area. So I don't know, that aspect of like thinking further down the line got me really interested in the potentials of a more modular type of system so that you could reuse these for other uses. I feel like it's kind of like a failure that we've built all these buildings that we can now not adapt or reuse. We just have to demolish and build new. And that, of course, has like a really high sustainability impact when you demolish a building and build something new.
Yeah. Well, Nate, you brought up a great point, though, just before we go. Like, so I read this article about how apparently, I think 40% or 50% of all of the commercial spaces are not going to be used by 2026. And I think
Whoa.
there's a big push to convert them to multifamily units, which is a pain because, it's not designed for that, like for water and HVAC and, and all the MEP systems. But there is the big push that's happening for all of the unused spaces. And yeah, renovation is definitely the better option to bring in more inventory into the market. But the cost is going to be high, though. You know what? I think the one major problem is wages, guys. We're not getting paid more.
But you know what? We're at this time in our industry where we've developed and developed and developed for so many years, and now we're out of space, and we have all this space. We have all these buildings, but they're not being used. So we don't have the land, but we have buildings that aren't being used to adapt to that. I think that is our next step.
Yeah.
And yes, it might cost more. It might take a longer time, but you know what they say? The greenest building is the one that's already built.
Wait, they actually say that?
Yes.
Oh.
That is what they say.
I was going to say the grass is greener. I thought you were going to say the grass is greener on the other side.
That's probably true too.
No, the grass is greener where you water it, and the greenest building is the one that's already built. So,
by the way,
that's fact number 3.
Yeah, what was that last fact that you used, Akhil? That was super interesting. What percentage of buildings?
I want to say it's 40 to 30. I want to say it's 40 to 30. 30 to 40%.
It will be obsolete.
Of the, what do you mean obsolete? It would be empty. It would remain empty by 2026.
See, that seems like a huge opportunity.
Are you talking about office space? Because I've heard that for office space, right? Not just buildings in general.
Yeah, office space.
30 to 40% of office spaces will be unused because 1, we're moving to a hybrid environment. 2, we're going to this remote setting. People are working from home. People are co-working. They go to WeWorks and coffee shops.
Yeah.
Offices don't need to accommodate for 100% of their population.
And there you have it, folks. We have explored the complex world of America's housing crisis through the eyes of the architects. From high interest rates to land scarcity to the challenges of prefab homes and the future of office spaces, it's clear that solving this puzzle will definitely take some innovative thinking. Remember, the greenest buildings might just be the one that's already built. So, whether you're a policymaker or an architect or somebody that's just looking to call a place home, there's plenty to ponder. Thank you for tuning in for this eye-opening discussion. If you found this intriguing, why not share with a friend? And don't forget to subscribe for more thought-provoking discussions on the built environment. So until next time, keep thinking outside the box, or should I say prefab.